Hey, you're listening to the Give Back Podcast, a weekly podcast hosted by Give Something Back coaches, staff, alumni, and current students. Our mission is to support students from all backgrounds through the college journey. This season, we're focused on helping you thrive during your first semester at college, from your first day on campus all the way to winter break. Our third episode is called Safety. In this episode, we'll discuss how to stay safe as a first year, from defining resources you can connect with on campus to sharing tips for how to get ready for the huge life transition of being in college. As always, if you have any questions, give us a shout on Instagram, Facebook, or by email. Here are the time-coded sections for episode 3. Please feel free to jump around if you'd like, or you can listen all the way through. Enjoy!
I'd say when I was younger, obviously, it's changed a lot as I've gotten older, but I think as I was younger, my dad made me feel super safe. He was always present. He was always available. He just seemed like this figure, right, that would keep you safe. And I think the older I've gotten, the more I've realized that I keep myself safe. Like, it's important to me that I protect myself both mentally and physically. And so, yeah, I think it's just kind of transitioned a bit.
Yeah, I think safety for me has, from a young age, I was an only child, divorced, so like very much a lot of like be my own advocate and make sure that I felt good bodily, like just that checking in, like, do I feel like I'm in a safe environment? But then when I got to college, I would say my sense of safety was really rooted around people. Right. Where I was like, I always felt the safest when I was like with my a cappella group or with like a group of friends or like with my root. So it was always like, I felt safe when I was like with people. And that was the beauty of college, was like you were just with people, and like if you were with the right people, they can make you really feel safe when you need them. So
yeah, the right community.
Yeah. And I would agree with you, Lydia. Like, my dad was always the one when I was younger growing up that, you know, I felt safest around. He's a big guy, so like I'm like, he could protect me. Nothing's ever gonna happen when he's around. But when I was at college, I had a friend's dad tell me, he was like, hey, you guys gotta keep your head on a swivel. And so I think with that, like, I still take that with me today. Like, you know, I have to protect myself. But when I was in college, like, I was always with a group of friends. I always walked around with somebody. And if I was by myself, I was like device free, always making sure that like I was paying attention to where I was going, making sure that if I was someplace that I wasn't like quite sure of where I should be, or where I was at, like making sure that I knew how to get out if I needed to and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think I have 3 brothers, and so I feel like growing up that was like, they were always a huge, each of them in different ways, but a big source of safety to me. And I agree with you. I think it's transferred to myself now that I am responsible for keeping me where I need to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think in college, though, safety in numbers is key, right? There is, again, it's the first time you're an adult. It's maybe the first time you don't have a lot of oversight from an adult. And so I think you have to protect yourself, and that comes with picking the right group of people to be with. It comes with knowing your surroundings. So like in previous podcast episodes, we talked about walking the campus and knowing where things are. Like, that's important so that you don't end up on the wrong street where you don't know where you are. You know what I mean? Just being really mindful.
Well, and I think too, like, when you're in college, you're in different environments that you're not used to. Right. And it's totally okay if you feel uncomfortable to like walk out of that situation. Like,
100%.
Yes.
Don't feel peer pressured to stay because like, oh, my friend's staying. Like, no, if you're uncomfortable, if there's things that are happening that you're uncomfortable with, or there's things that you see that you're like, yeah, this is not for me, like, you can leave. Right. No one's telling you have to stay.
Exactly.
I think that, again, going back to our last episode, just talking about being your own advocate, this is another place where this should show up really loudly for you, and like put your people-pleasing skills off to the side and really try to take a assertive eye at it of like, what am I doing right now?
Right.
Because you have to protect you more than anything
It's
else.
that selfishness, right? It's
Yeah.
It's that part of being selfish is saying, I have to put my, and that's not to say that you're not responsible for the people around you. Like, I think a part of that group number is like, hey, if we're thinking of communities and community safety, that, you know, if I'm showing up for somebody and trusting that they're going to show up for me, I have to be there for them. Mm-hmm. But obviously, if you're in a situation where you are not enough in terms of a resource, that's when you call campus services. That's when you call EMS. That's when you call somebody to come and be of more help than you can be. So,
and so many times on campus, they have those blue lights, right? Like you can stand there, you can push the button, and security be with you within 30 seconds or a minute or whatever. Like it goes back to those early podcast episodes. Like, don't be afraid. Don't be embarrassed. If you want someone to walk you home, you have every right for someone to walk you home, and that's perfectly acceptable.
And those resources, again, are there for you.
Right.
You just have to know how and where to find them.
Yeah. So today, on today's podcast, we are going to talk about personal safety and boundaries and making sure that you're safe on campus, making sure that you know where to go, who to talk to, and just really protecting yourself, which is really important, as we talked about, being a little bit selfish, right, when you're on campus and when you're going to college for the first time. So we'll just go around and introduce ourselves. We'll start with...
I'm Kelsey Novak. I work with Give Something Back. I'm the program director for our Illinois office.
I'm Shannon Labus, and I'm a student success coach in Illinois and Kansas.
Lydia Matlock. I'm the chief of operations for Give Something Back.
Jackson Prince, work for Give Something Back. I'm the producer of this podcast, as well as a bunch of other content for Give Back. And I'm also a few years out of college, so I've got some knowledge of what's going on in terms of safety and wellness on campus.
Yes, thank you all for being here today.
Of course.
So we'll kind of just start out with what we've been talking about, which is kind of those resources available to you on campus to be safe. And maybe just even, what is safety, right? Like, what does that mean for you? Is it just physical safety? There's so much more to it, I think. So let's kind of get into that piece of it.
I think there's like safety in the aspect of on campus, you're going to have either public safety officers, or some campuses actually have like armed police officers.
Right.
So there's that, but then there's also safety in the aspect of like keeping yourself safe. So off of campus, if you're walking to the grocery store or you're walking somewhere else, like knowing where you're at, knowing, how to get there, but also like if you're going out and your friend's staying home, being like, hey, if I need to call you because something's up, like I'm going to use you as a resource. Like I'm going to call you. You're my to-go person tonight. So there's a lot of different ways that you can be safe on campus.
Well, and I think it's stuff that maybe our parents, or guardians put on our phones, like Life 360 or Find My, right? Those are good.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, use them when you go to college. You don't have to have your mom or your grandma seeing where you are, but your roommate or a friend. I mean, still to this day, when I take an Uber, especially at night, I just share my route and I share it with a friend of mine. Like I just want somebody to know where I am.
Yep.
Because I travel a lot and I need people to know that I'm in an Uber by myself somewhere at night, right? Like it's not embarrassing. It's just the nature of things.
Like the Uber is a great, place to start, because anytime I travel alone in an Uber, I always plug my route into my actual maps.
Yes.
So like if I know like, hey, this Uber driver turned right instead of left, let's see where it goes. And then I'm like, okay, now we're really off course. Now I can be like, you can let me out now. Or I can just like quickly be like, hey, this isn't like really going how I expect it to. So like that's just a tip that I use now as an adult for my own personal safety. But like that's a good thing to have in college too, is just tracking your own route to make sure that somebody's not driving you in the complete opposite direction.
Right.
Again, well, and I think like Ubers on campus is like, I mean, we didn't have that when I was in school, but I do think it's a lot more prevalent now. Like, where you're like, I'll just call an Uber to get me home. So just maybe again, that planning ahead of like, when, who, and make sure that it's like a safe, that you're following all those protocols for yourself, I think.
And I think that also, if Uber isn't an option, there's two sort of routes, right? Like the first would be, if you don't know somebody that has a car that you trust yet,
right,
don't go places that you need to drive for the first semester that you're there. You can plan a pretty good social life on campus, and perhaps with a few places that are walking distance from campus. You don't need to have that friend that's going to take you all the way somewhere you need to go. Hopefully that's someone you can become friends with at some point in your journey. And then the other part of it is that there are lots of events where there's sometimes like supervised transportation. So there's somebody who's going to take you, whether it's a bus or a shuttle or something. And then there are other times where, for example, like I know lots of Greek life people like to have these parties that are off campus and have shuttles and buses that maybe aren't the most safe plan. So it's just about understanding, okay, what does it take to get to and fro? And then within that, like, what is my safety plan to make sure I'm on that bus, or I'm at the right place, or I feel taken care of, I'm going to get delivered to my final destination no matter what.
Right. And there's a lot of things that come with being on campus, and that includes drinking, that includes all kinds of fun other activities, right, that seem really exciting at the time, but they do put you off your plan sometimes, right? And so if you feel confident in how you're getting there and getting home, then you can have fun and not be as stressed about how, you know what I mean, like about that safety plan and getting back. So we've talked about scheduling ourselves in previous, podcasts. We've talked about being aware of our surroundings. Like, just take that extra minute, right? That's all it takes, is a minute or two just to kind of plan out your next step, because you're going to make mistakes when you're in college, but your mistakes don't have to end in something that's going to be either life-threatening or
life-changing.
Yeah.
I think the big thing too, with my own children and knowing so many students, like the getting there is never usually a problem.
Right.
Like, we get ourselves there.
That's right.
It's the exit strategy.
Right.
And that also needs to have as much thought as the outfit that you're wearing, or, what beverages you decided to pick up, or whatever that might be. Like, how are you getting out of this situation?
Right.
And I just think that's kind of left off the table a lot.
Taking that extra minute, I mean, it's so great that we're here, at this junction to really talk about this early on, because if you look at statistically, like, when are these really catastrophic, like, college changing experiences happening, it's usually in the first 4 months of college.
Right.
So, it's really happening, with 18-year-olds, with people who are just having their first steps on campus. And it's hard to take that first step to be like, hey, like, let me make sure that before I go to this really exciting thing or go to this really risky, daring thing, that I'm going to be safe on the way there and on the way back, or even while I'm there. So I think just taking that moment to check in, look at your surroundings, and even sometimes maybe deciding, you know what, I don't have a really good safety feeling for this. I'm good. I'll go find something else to do. College is an amazing place because there's so many different experiences that you can have. That FOMO doesn't really exist, because if you're missing out on one thing, you're gonna have an opportunity to have another experience.
And no one knows what your plan was, so you don't even have to have that feeling of like, oh my god, but everybody's gonna think I'm a loser if I don't show up here. Whatever. No one knows. Maybe you have something way better going on. And like, live that way.
Yeah. And if that way better is laying in bed and watching TikTok, like, that's fine.
That's okay.
Right. Like, we all have to have that downtime, right?
Yes.
And I think that's important too, is like, that FOMO is real, right? And I think it's important to realize that there's not a specific thing you have to do in order to be cool, or like in order to fit in. There's so many different clubs and organizations and groups of people on campus that you don't have to go Greek. You don't have to join an athletic event. Like, you can be with a lot of different people that are safe to be around.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there's, you got video game clubs and all that stuff that you can join that.
Yeah. I was Greek. I was in Greek life all 4 years of college, and we had a blast, right? Like, we had fun all the time, but I did have that core group of girls that I knew, if I'm not comfortable here, we're leaving, right? Yeah. Like, I don't have to ask. It's one of those, you just give them kind of the eye, and they know it's time to move on to that next place. And I had a great experience. Now, not everybody does, obviously, but I think it's just important not to just immediately single out groups too, because of the fear or because of what you've seen on TV, or, there's a lot of ways to stay safe and have fun on campus.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was Greek also, and I think one of the biggest takeaways that I took from that is from the time we were in the sorority, we always had designated drivers.
Yes.
Every weekend. You either borrowed a friend's car, or if you had a car there or whatever, and like, it became a non-issue. Like,
you signed up.
You signed up. You're doing it, and you're gonna. And actually, it was very fun to be the designated driver too. It was totally good. It was entertaining, and that's what I'm doing tonight. So you could also feel good, like, I'm not missing out. I'm doing this service for everybody, and next week you'll do it for me. And I think, like, that sort of carried into my young adult life, where we would, like, then plan as we were going out, like, who is the designated driver tonight, because somebody has to be. Yeah. So I felt like it was like a good life,
a good life lesson.
Little life lesson.
Yeah, for sure. I love it.
I will say a lot of that stuff does come into play with hope in your sophomore, junior, senior year.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a bit more difficult in your first year to really find the structure in which you can have a safe experience. So, I mean, you still have these really, like, unfortunate realities of, first of all, you have 75% of people saying, hey, I'm partying more in college than I was in high school. So that's already saying, hey, no matter what, you're going to be experiencing bigger parties, more risk, more things that might get into your safety. And then you have, of course, these really staggering numbers of sexual assault, 1 in 4, people report themselves as victims. Many more probably don't report themselves.
Absolutely.
So, these numbers that are coming into play, and so much of that happening before you've even been able to find that group, that sorority, that friend, that car that's going to help you keep you safe. So, so much of it really is about going back to that selfishness. Like, where am I? How am I making sure that I am taken care of? And how can I not be afraid to look to someone that I trust and say, hey, I'm having a bad night, or hey, maybe I had a few too many to drink. Like, can you just take care of me and have that be a person that's you're really going to be able to trust?
Right.
Yeah, and I know we talked about on some previous podcasts, like finding your person and utilizing your resources, and to that point, Jackson, like the sexual assault, like I realize there's a lot of people that don't report that, but there are people on campuses that will listen to you and will help you do the right thing if something does come up. And you just need to find that person and confide in them if you're comfortable with doing that. But no one can help you if you don't help yourself first, and try your best to report that incident.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. So I when I was in school, I was a part of I ran a freshman pre-orientation program. So we had like 70 first years that came in. And we heard a lot of stories just from, students coming in about their experiences, things that they've gone through. And there are lots of people on campus who are called what's known as mandatory reporters,
Yes, right.
Which is a big deal, which essentially means like, hey, if somebody on campus hears something concerning, whether it's about criminal activity or your safety or something, there's a mandatory need to report something, especially in terms of your safety. I would say more so than anything else, just to make sure that you are in the safest position.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's important to know that there are systems to take these issues into, and there are more than just therapists. There are actually students walking around who are there to help you and are just there to be your advocates.
Yeah, and when I was at the university, like I had an incident where a student came in and started explaining a situation to me, and I was like, time out. Like, before we even begin this conversation, I want you to know that I am a mandated reporter. So anything you tell me, depending on the severity of it, like, we may have to take some next steps. So I just want you to be aware of that before you start explaining your situation to me. And they were like, I appreciate that. I'm comfortable moving forward. So, I think too, from a university level, if there's anyone from a university level, watching, like, that's something that you should disclose to students as well, because they're already vulnerable in that moment, and you don't want them to feel as if they're being taken advantage of again.
Mm-hmm. Right. Absolutely. I do think that we've talked a lot about physical safety, right? And that you have to be aware of your surroundings. You have to have the right people in your corner. Mm-hmm. And even before that, you have to be selfish in your own personal safety, right? I mean, that's just really, really important. And again, knowing your people who advocate for you. So your therapist, your staff, your RA, people like that on campus. But then that whole other level of personal safety, that is mental safety and boundaries and things like that. And so I would ask you all, like, how do you protect yourself like that, right? That's a hard one.
That's a hard one, I think. I mean, I'm 51, and the boundaries thing is still
it's super hard.
A constant education for myself of like, I think the biggest thing that I know about boundaries and have to always remind myself is that they're yours.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it's not up to you to respect my boundaries. It is up to me to respect my boundaries. Mm-hmm. And that can be the hardest thing sometimes, because sometimes it feels not fun, or it feels like I'm hurting somebody's feelings, or I'm going to be a bad friend, or I'm not going to be interesting, or whatever. But the truth is that you're the one you live with.
Yeah. Every day.
At the end of the day. So you have to, and I think that's again, communication with yourself. Like Amada said in last episode about, like, take your list and, like, let's look at this, and where are places that I know I would be vulnerable.
Right.
Yes.
It will happen.
Yes.
And so what is my plan in those vulnerable moments? How am I going to do that?
Right.
College, is such a messy, vulnerable, emotional time. Lots of people want to be their authentic selves, and they don't know what that means, or they want to play a different self, right? And that involves a whole different other, set of boundary breaking and oversharing and all this different stuff that you're going to run into. And it's okay to say, hey, you know what, like, I know you're comfortable sharing XYZ. I know you're comfortable doing this. I'm good. This is where I get off at the station. And, the hard part is to not let those, especially in the early days, to not let anyone else's judgment or anyone else's, criticism or whatever anyone else has to say to you get to you, because you know that you're on a plan, that you're sticking to a self that you're comfortable with, that you don't need to necessarily match every person's level in college, because there's so much of that.
There's
Like,
so much.
right? Are you
Yeah.
partying as hard as I am? Are you telling me as much as I'm telling you? Right? Like you don't have to match
have to
that
win.
bar,
Right.
Even if it feels like it is that kind of contest,
Yeah.
because some of that groupthink does go that way sometimes.
I think that's such an important point to remember too, is that I think in college you feel precarious because maybe you just left home for the first time, or you know, we also talked about this earlier, being treated like an adult by your professors and like everyone that's surrounding you. So you are an adult, right? I don't know yet.
Yeah.
I'm figuring it out, but I think that we tend to think you're the only one that's figuring that out. Like you clearly have it all established already, and like that is not true. Everyone you're running into on that campus is at some stage of figuring it out, including your professors, including your staff,
Yep.
including like, because you're human. So we're all just figuring it out. And I think sometimes when you like take a step back and look at people that way, you can go like, oh,
Yes.
well, then it is a little easier for me to uphold what I want to do then.
Right. When you know that you're
Because
not.
you're just figuring it out too.
Yes,
so
everybody's
whether
there.
you're mad at me or not, it doesn't matter because
Right.
you'll figure that out. That's up to you.
Yeah.
But I'm going to figure me out.
I think so. And I think too, it's like those boundaries, because not everyone comes to college from an idyllic background, right? And so there's going to be boundaries that are going to be, you're going to have to really firmly set when you go to college, because it is your time for you. It's your time to be selfish. And sometimes there's things at home that are pulling at you, or that, you know, you feel bad about that you're leaving behind, but you're doing this to better yourself.
Right.
You know, and I think those boundaries are the hard ones sometimes.
Well, and I think if you're around somebody who continuously pushes those boundaries,
Right.
like maybe you shouldn't be around that person.
Right.
Whether it's a friend, a significant other, or
Even a family
teacher,
member.
a family
Even
member.
family,
if that's
Like,
what it
yeah,
is,
like
yeah.
you can walk away from that.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting because college is one of these times that really wraps all of your experiences up into one bundle. So you're expected to carry all these difficult things from, you know, your background before school into all the difficult things of college, and be this sort of like fully formed person all the time that's able to carry all of it. And that's just not realistic. You're
Right.
not going to be able to do that. There are going to be times where you are demanded to loosen up a bit, you know, just to like not carry it in. And so it's so important to have an outlet weekly, something like a therapeutic service, you know, something that just allows you to say, you know what, I still hold all of those things that I brought with me. And even if I'm not expressing them every single day,
Right.
I have something that is routinely allowing me to get it out. To
Yeah.
just continue. So that, I mean, therapy really worked for me when I was on campus. I was able to like say, hey, this is my hour, or like I get to work
Yes.
on this stuff that I brought from home. And then it allows the rest of my week to not be soured by this thought of like, oh, this thing is stewing inside of me and I can't really get it
Well,
out.
and I think too, a lot of kids come to college, whether they're from a fantastic family background or they're from a background that's not so great. And I think when they get there, they realize like, oh shoot, I should have had these boundaries 10 years ago.
Right.
And so
That's heavy.
they're finally there, and they're like, okay, like, oh shoot, like I love my family, but this is a lot. Like I need to start like inserting these boundaries. And so I think too, you're not only learning how to like hold true to those that you already have in place, but you're learning how to set new ones, because you're like, I need this needs
should
to
have
happen.
happened.
Yeah, this should have happened.
Well, there's a lot when you go to campus. It's not even like protection so much, but it's just things that you thought were the norm,
Yeah.
or you know what I mean, like things that you just thought were okay that you grew up with, and then you go to college and realize like that's not how everybody else lives, or that's not the norm, and that's hard too. So like seeking that therapeutic outlet, or like going to the gym, or having that downtime, that's important to reconnect with yourself and, you know, decide again what is important to you moving forward. Like what do you want to hold true to, and what do you want to continue to build upon?
Yeah, it's like a fresh start, but you still get to keep all the things from
Yeah.
that time. So and college is such a great place to keep that, because it's an intellectual space where you get to
Yeah.
really step away physically from maybe those parts of your background that weren't so great, and say, hey, like I can actually think about this and make critical decisions about how I want to move forward, because you're on a place that's challenging you to do this. So, you know, whether it's a class, you want to write a paper about something that you experienced as a kid, or if you want to join a club and bond with other people who maybe had that same experience. And you know, there's so many different ways to take that, you know, whatever you were going through and funnel it into something healthier and productive. And it's just about embracing whatever you are in a way that is not going to put you in situations where maybe it's too much or maybe it's overwhelming or maybe
Right.
you've overasked of yourself.
And again, if you get into a place where it's too much, you can walk out.
That's right.
You know, nobody's forcing you to stay anywhere. Nobody's making you do that. So knowing yourself enough to know, like, this is putting me in a position that's unhealthy for me.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave today and we'll reevaluate tomorrow, right? Like, I think, again, you have to protect yourself mentally.
And you don't have to explain anything to
You
anybody.
don't.
No.
Just a good old Irish goodbye
Good old
and
Irish
walk
goodbye,
out.
right? You'll see them again later, right? Like, I think it's totally fine, and we can't hold ourselves to this like people pleasing.
Yeah.
right. Like that's
Well,
we're
anybody
good.
that is truly yours, it truly loves you and truly wants the best for you, even if they don't get it, if they are like, that was weird, will want to talk to you about it,
Right.
and want to learn more, and it won't break the relationship over that, because they'll go, oh, I would make a different choice, but okay. I'm glad you helped yourself to that. That's great.
Well, and you need to do that for others too.
Yep.
You
We
know,
all
that's-
do, that's part of the evolution, I think, that you learn,
Yeah.
as an adult, as a young adult, that like maybe curious over judgment is always the
Yes.
best way to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think sort of switching gears, but another part of, I'm thinking so much about just being proactive, right?
Yeah.
Because so much of
Yeah.
this is not stuff that you think about until you get there.
Right.
And then it all happens so fast. You know, first week of orientation week is so crazy and fun. You're running around and then it's first day of classes and then you're in it.
Yeah.
And so much of your safety preparation has to happen before these experiences. Because chances are your quick judgment is not going to be so great when
Right.
you're throwing all these different new sensitivities. So I guess my question for you guys would be like, what is the best way to really like be able to analyze the situation from afar and make healthy steps into it, if you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
how can you do it before you even get to
It's a great
campus,
question.
right?
I think I would assume that you will find yourself in situations that are not safe.
Right.
Just assume that it's going to happen, because it's probably at some point in your life it's going to.
Right.
So I think, honestly, like, when you get there and you take all the emotions out of it and all of the like, oh, no, never me, I'll make a better choice than that. You won't. You're going to be there, so now what?
Yep.
Like, there's a theater game, the yes game, right?
Yes.
Like, you're not allowed to deny what's happening. I think
Right,
this
you
is
just
like,
go
you
with
know,
it.
like, okay, so you're at a party. You've had too much to drink. You can't get a ride home.
Yes.
You can't say no to that.
Right.
You have to tell me what you're going to do now. And I think, like, playing that game with yourself and just, like, now when it comes up, you've sort of seen it. You've sort of considered it. You've had some options. And maybe it made you research, like, what the campus, line is to get a ride home
Right.
that you wouldn't have not done if you were like, no, I'll always be good.
I read an article years and years ago that if you imagine yourself in a bad position, right, and you kind of play that out like you're talking about, that it just like holds, like that. What's that movie where it just like takes out? Is it Inside Out? Right, like it's
Yeah,
like pieces
yeah,
of your brain,
it
right?
is.
So those memories, right? So like that memory will then come back into play, right, when you need it the most, when you're in a state of panic, let's say. So it is about just playing it out, thinking about what you would do, researching, and that's all done ahead of time, right? Like that is your transitional summer job, is to not only get your classes together, get your schedule right, get your dorm bedding, but also to think about your safety plan. What are you going to do?
Well, maybe this is a good place to pivot, but like, Jackson, you're a recent college graduate. What type of like technology was available to you for
yeah.
safety on campus? Because I know a lot of schools have apps and like not only just like there's an incident, but also a weather related incident.
Yeah, absolutely. It was all, most, if not all schools have their own app at this point. So any alerts that are going out, whether it's like, hey, there's a suspicious person on campus, like all that stuff is now done through the school. So really making sure that when you get to school, like all of your alerts are set so that anything that's happening on campus that may involve you and your safety, you know about. So that's definitely step one. And then, all of these tracking things, like just being able to know, hey, I'm not here. Where's my roommate? Or hey, my ride's phone died because I can't see their location anymore. What's my plan B? Just being able to really understand that we have the tools at our disposal to keep ourselves safe. It's just about that awareness of being like, I need to check my phone. I need to know where I am.
Well, and being in the Midwest, like we have bad summer storms. We have terrible winter storms. Like I remember like in not only just working at the university, but also in school, like we would get weather alerts in the wintertime, like, hey, there's a bad snowstorm. Campus is closed today. Okay, I lived on campus. Where am I going to eat?
Yep.
What's going to be available to me that day? Like, because no one's here except for those initial, student services. But again, I got those alerts through my student portal and also through text messages at the time. So, just knowing that those are available and you need to sign up for them. You have to have it signed up.
Yep.
Yeah.
And plan for it.
Yeah.
So, you have a dorm. So if you have you can't go to the dining hall,
Yep.
right? Like have oatmeal packets, have ramen, like have things that you can eat easily in your room. And if you don't have access to those, there's food pantries on every campus. Traditionally, there's places that you can go to get some of those items, non-perishable things to keep in your room. But you do want to be prepared. I don't want you to not eat because there's a snowstorm.
Well, and the other thing is too, like, again, being in the Midwest, if you don't have like warm clothes,
right,
like there's a place on campus that you can go get a warm coat or a sweatshirt or whatever. I mean, when I worked at the university, we had kids from California come in and they're like,
yes.
I've never been in a snowstorm. And I'm like, well, better buckle up, buddy, because it's coming. So like, again, they're like, I have no place to go get these things because we just don't have them.
Right.
So knowing, again, in the last episode, resources are there for those types of weather events.
Because that's keeping you safe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because some of these campuses who are traditionally used to this weather, they're not closing.
No.
So my friend from Louisiana, who's now in Minnesota, you're going to class. And so you need your coat, you need a snow boot, right? Yep. Like you need something to make it. So just be prepared for that and know it goes back to choosing where you want to go to school, right?
Yeah.
Like
that's part of the package.
The part of the package. Yeah. You can't just decide I'm only going to go there 4 months out of the year, right? Like
just the warm ones.
Just the warm and nice ones. Like there's going to be times that are going to be uncomfortable.
I even have another thing to add, and just thinking about where you're going to go to school. Chances are you're going to know where you're going to school by June.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things that really helped my sense, because I went to a school where I knew nobody before me, but I joined that Facebook group, and I just started looking at like who are the maybe corny seeming people who are making really nice posts on Facebook, right? And you're always like, all right, like maybe they're not going to be my best friend at school, but I know that they're like,
they know
they're going to like me.
They're going to like me. They're going to be very nice. They'll be a person that will respond to my text if I need them.
Yeah.
So like one of the things to do just to like prepare is to get acquainted with what feels like strangers, but really just are like eager incoming first years who they may not be your best friends and they may only be your friend for like a week.
That's okay.
It's good to have somebody that you know that you're like, hey, like we met on Facebook and I know that you and I are going to get like a lunch at some point. And that's a number in your phone to be able to have. And who knows, maybe they have parents who, will want to get your contacts to in case of it. So
you never know.
So like that kind of preparation, those Facebook groups, even if Facebook isn't the go-to social media anymore, those are still, class of 2028, whatever that is. Those are very, very active places to find.
I feel like that's a great use of technology now that like we certainly didn't have on. I mean, you had to old-fashionedly like meet somebody. Like, hi.
Call them on their landline.
Yes, and the rotary dial.
Right.
But like I just think that's such a good use of like what we have available to us now that like it is actually that easy to get to know somebody at least on the surface level.
You have GroupMe,
and say like, oh, we both have the same chemistry class. Okay, cool.
Right.
We'll share notes or let's set up a study meeting now because I know I'm going to suck at chemistry. So let's make sure
be prepared.
Yeah.
Another thing that's interesting about safety is, I think in the last episode we were talking about night owls. People who were up super late. That was very much my experience. I was up till 2 a.m. every night, whatever it was, and that wasn't out of like it wasn't unhealthy because I was like, listen, I'm a night person. My first class isn't going to be till 10 a.m. no matter what. Like I never had a class before then. I knew that about myself, so I always slept enough, barely. But I did find myself often coming out of a building on campus at like 1 a.m. And like. That's probably going to happen at some point to you, whether you're like late night studying for a test or you're at some rehearsal that's gone too late. So that's something to keep in mind just in terms of like your timeline is going to be very different from high school, right? Like in high school, you're usually 90% of the time you're at home by, nightfall. And even if you're not, you're going to be home soon after nightfall. Or nightfall is your cue to get home.
And someone's waiting for you to get home.
And someone's waiting for you to get home. That's exactly right. It's on you now to get home. No one's calling you to get back home. It's totally on you to say, hey, you know what? Like I should probably get back to my dorm, at a relatively safe time. So that's just another thing about like this accountability of like, how do I what are going to be my markers if it's not going to be like nightfall or 7 p.m. because dinner is going to be on the table? Like, what are going to be my markers for like when I need to be somewhere?
Right.
You know?
Right. Because it goes back into, did you eat?
That's right.
Are you sleeping?
I was just thinking that. I'm like, it's a different, when you're in high school, there are parameters that we are held to. Like your high school drama coach cannot keep you there until 1 a.m.
Right.
You know, your football coach cannot keep you there all night long. But in college, the senior student who's working on this major project and wants you,
they can stay whenever they want.
I mean, they can. You can say no. You can say I'm going to leave. But like,
you could have a boundary.
you can have a boundary. That's great use of a boundary.
Right. It is.
But you know, like as a freshman coming in and you're like,
I know.
oh, I have to, that's a graduate, project. Like,
I need to be there.
I need to be there.
Well, that's when you say, hey, I need to find someone to walk home with, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's when you say, hey, you know what? You're an upperclassman. You're coming home with me.
Right.
You're walking me home to my dorm. You
Right.
know?
Yeah.
And
Right.
I think it's just that it's a bit of boldness, honestly. And it might feel uncomfortable at first to sort of demand that for yourself from other people. But the beauty of the collegiate system is like that senior who's going to help you was once a freshman who needed
Absolutely.
help.
Absolutely.
So what really shocked me when I first got to campus, I mean, more than anything was just like the genuine kindness of most of these peers on campus, because most of them have been where you are. They've been scared. They've been, lost. They've been looking to some stranger to be like, hey, can you just like show me where my classroom is? So
Yes.
like just being bold enough to say, hey, I need help. Chances are somebody is going to come to your aid very quickly and say, hey, I was once you, let's go.
Right. And like Jackson, you said you're a night owl, you're up till 2:30.
Right.
I mean, kind of campus life, people are up late because they're studying or they're utilizing the library or they're finding a space on campus that's quiet for them to work because they can't be in their dorm room. So like it actually is wild, like how many people are out and about, like walking around. And most of the campuses I've been on are pretty well lit. You know, like you see those blue lights all throughout, but like I don't think that you're ever going to be at a point on campus where you're like, "Ooh, I'm the only one out and about walking around at 1 a.m." No, you're not.
You're not, but you want to find that other 1 a.m.er.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's not
Make a new
just
friend.
right? Make a late night
I mean,
friend.
I won't be up at 1 a.m.
right.
can tell you
I would have
right
been
now.
asleep for 10
About
hours, but
8:40 is my cutoff.
right, exactly. I do think too. It's important to find those people that want to be.
Yeah.
And so, like when you do your roommate assessment, don't say that you are a morning person when you're
If
not
you're
a morning
not,
person.
no.
No, don't be aspirational yet.
No, don't say right.
Be realistic first,
Right.
then be aspirational.
Don't say you're clean when you're not, right? Like, let's be reasonable so that we don't already start things out. Because honestly, that person sleeps in your room. So when we talk about safety and boundaries and everything else, your roommate is a big
Huge.
piece of that,
Yeah.
right? Like your suite mates or your roommate or whoever your college does their dorms. Like, you have to feel safe in your space.
Yeah.
And that starts with you being honest with yourself about what you need.
Yeah.
And maybe like we talked in a previous episode about making a housing agreement, right?
Yeah.
Like making sure that you put it in a text. Like I have to study at, this time. If my light bothers you, you just need to let me know, or whatever that is, right? Like maybe bring your headphones, maybe bring that eye mask, like if you need extra sleep.
Well, and I think that's a good point because a lot of kids, like we talked about in the previous episode, a lot of kids may not have textbooks and they'll just sit there and just go all semester without having textbooks. You can't sit and go all semester with a roommate that may be up till 5 a.m. if you're not, or may have
Right.
want to have endless amounts of people in and out of your room and blare music or whatever. Like you can't suffer because then everything else suffers. So like again, setting boundaries and being firm with yourself and being like, hey, this is not working for me. Like we need to figure something out.
Yeah, and early on, I mean, again, like going back to our second episode, talking about one of the deadlines for these things, like, hey, if you're having an issue with your roommate, and you can't resolve it in a person-to-person conversation, go to your RA, bring them in early on. Say, hey, we're not going to let this problem linger in a second semester because then it might be too late to change roommates. And if it's a real issue, then you can go to the housing office and they'll help you. And so like there are tracks with your issues to really prevent you from getting to that worst case scenario. And it's just about being aware and checking with yourself, being, hey, am I okay? Or is my roommate okay? Are we doing okay? Am I, these are things you can do every day on your college journey to avoid that worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think all three of these first 3 episodes, we've talked a lot about self-advocacy, searching out resources, finding these people. And that seems really difficult for certain individuals, right? Like if you're a staunch introvert, right? Or like that's hard. And I think that we shouldn't take that lightly. Like,
I agree.
you know, I think we have to really think about the fact that that's not easy to introduce yourself to people, to ask people to help you, to go up and talk to a professor. So what advice would you give our introverts to make that a little easier? Because that's hard.
Yeah. I'll tell you a term that I learned when I first got to school, which is power dynamics, which I just didn't really know much about until college. But realizing that there's a natural introversion that's going to come about by being a first year. That you look at the power dynamics of what's going on campus, that there are so many levels of people that are, you know, seemingly more powerful than you are in terms of whether they're the grades higher than you, they hold certain roles in certain clubs or groups that feel like they can kind of give you a schedule or dictate you. Professors have power roles. That there are so many people who are above you that it often feels like, what is my say? And the truth is, and the thing you don't really learn until later, is that none of these folks have a say in your journey, that you are the only person.
Yeah.
So I think the initial step to get over that introversion is to just figure out, you know, what are your key needs? What are the things that you are going to voice that no matter what you need? And even if that's the script that you're going to stick to for a little bit and you're a little bit nervous to improvise and kind of add more things to the plate, good. Find those 3 or 4 things that you really, really need out of your first semester and just continue to advocate for those things. And once you get those things, then you can open up and you can kind of find yourself at a bit more of like, oh, I can play. This is really feeling like more in my control.
Yeah.
Well, and we talked about in episode 2, like everybody on campus, whether they're administrators, their faculty, their staff, they're there to see you succeed.
Right.
So I realize that like it may be hard to come out and be like, hey, I need help with this, or I need help finding this. Let me tell you right now, like everyone there wants to see you walk across the stage, get your degree, and, you know, find a job that is what you want to do. And so as difficult as it may be to step up and say, I really need some help here, it is way easier to put you on a path sooner than it is later. It's easier to correct it in the moment than it is to go back and say, we have to correct all of this, you know, these classes and stuff like that. So just know, like, everyone's there to see you succeed. Everyone wants to see you graduate. So just say something.
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite questions when it comes down to stuff like that is like, again, why? Why is it hard for you to say that you need something? And if you can sit with yourself, and I do that with students all the time, like, why? Why do you think that is? Why do you think you feel that way? And that's a hard thing to sit with sometimes, I think, because if you're being really honest with yourself, the answers might be a little surprising. They might be a little daunting. But if you can do that, and then you realize, like for me, a lot of times my why is I just don't think I deserve that.
Right.
Like, I just don't think I deserve to trouble you for something. And yes, I do.
You do.
Like, when I say it out loud, it sounds ridiculous, doesn't
Right,
it?
right.
But I think we hold those little beliefs inside of us, and then they grow into the mountains that kind of keep us quiet. Introverted does not mean silent.
Right.
100%.
Introverted does not mean you do not speak your needs. That is not what that means.
Right.
And when we start to realize that too, that's a dynamic as well. Like the difference between the person who's doing all the talking and the person who's doing all the absorbing. That's all that means.
Right.
Like, so it doesn't mean
It's
that
where you find your energy, right?
Yeah, exactly. So like, yes, you might have to take a deep breath and be like, I'm going to do this thing that I'm not used to doing, and it's hard for me.
And I'm going to be uncomfortable.
And I'm going to be uncomfortable. Oh man, I love being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You learn more when you're
Now.
uncomfortable. Right, right?
I don't know if I would have said that when I was 18,
I wouldn't have.
but I think now, like, that's when that feeling comes, and I'm like, oh, I'm so uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable right now.
Yeah.
Like, this
There you
is
go.
challenging, but
Right.
like, let's lean in and just be uncomfortable, and then find out what happens after that.
And truly, I mean, the best place to be uncomfortable is that freshman year common.
Yeah.
Like, it is the best place to just sit with like a bunch of people from all over who are equally as uncomfortable, even if they're showing it in different ways.
Right.
You know, that to just sit in and say, okay, I'm here right now. You know, what can I do to add to this experience? And the truth is, you just be yourself.
Yeah.
Just be exactly who you were intended to be. Remember your goals of why you're there, and just, you know, act out. And if you replay the day and you're like, oh man, like I wish I did this, guess what? You have the next day. There, you know,
It starts again.
I tell people when I work with students and ask them, you know, what kinds of schools they want to go to, I say to them, hey, like, don't imagine where you're going to have your best day. That's easy. imagine where you're going to have your worst day. Imagine where you're going to feel your lowest. You're going to feel your loneliness. You're going to feel depressed, anxious, whatever it is. Imagine that day. And if you feel like you can be on that campus, be in that room, be in that student community, and have a bad day and rebound and be resilient, then you know that you're at the right school. And just that attitude of, as you said, like embracing that you're going to have a bad day. You're going to find yourself in trouble. But can you get yourself out of that day to get back to what college is supposed to be?
Right.
That's what it's all about. That's the college experience, because it's going to have those ups and downs.
Yep.
So we have a question from Emmy, and she's in Washington, and she wants to know kind of about, so Emmy's kind of seems to be from a home life that maybe isn't super comfortable for her. And she wants to know, she talked about the FERPA that was on episode 2. Does she have to do a FERPA for her parents to know about her life on campus?
No, you're not required to do it. It's totally optional. If you have somebody else in your life that you trust rather than a parent or a guardian, if it's an aunt or an uncle or a cousin, like you can put them down, but you're not required to do a FERPA. FERPA is very similar to like medical. So
like a HIPAA.
Yeah.
Right.
So like you're over 18, you don't have to give consent to anybody. You're an adult. But just to kind of backtrack, so FERPA will cover like financial aid related questions. It will cover billing questions, grades, transcript requests, medical requests, like those types of things. So again, no, you're not required to fill it out. That's a good question.
It is a good question, because again, it goes back to boundaries, right? Maybe this is her time to be on her own and to be an adult, and she may not want her parents to know everything.
Yeah.
But
I will say though,
Yeah.
before you go on, that I came across several students who did not have those adults in their life that they wanted to, and they didn't sign a FERPA. It does add more work to your.
It does.
Which is it's another part of that resilience that got you through high school, of being independent, being able to fend for yourself. Like that's an incredible trait that we should celebrate, but also acknowledging like, hey, just because you turned 18 and you moved away doesn't mean that you're suddenly going to be able to handle it all on your own. So even more important to find those relationships, create those connections with people on campus to help you through those things.
Yes.
Find a trusted adult on campus. If you don't have one at home, find one on campus, because that person is going to be vital in getting you to where you need to go.
Or reach out to give back, right?
Yeah.
Like that's one of the reasons we're here. So feel free to keep, Emmy, if you have any other questions, like let us know, see how we can help you. But I think what's really important is that we can be that resource for you. We can help you. We can help guide you through that. We're not just available on this podcast. You can go to our website. If you want more of that one-to-one coaching, we have opportunities for that as well. But we do have outlets for you. We do have opportunities for you to learn more and to keep gathering information. So good question, Emmy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that one.
I like that one too.
So if you could go back in time, I would say, back to your college days, right? You don't have a lot of time. Some of us have a longer.
I can touch my toes back.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's exciting. What would you tell yourself? Like, what would you tell yourself about protecting yourself back then? And I think about it, like if I were to tell younger me, it would be to protect my self-worth, I think, right? Like college is a really hard time because you're growing up. Everything is changing. Your ideals are changing, right? I think I would tell myself to just trust my intuition a little bit more. Usually when that intuition tells you something's wrong, it probably is. You probably need to take a second to stop and think. But that's what I would protect.
Yeah, I think I would, similarly, I think I would tell little me that, that you're worth it. You're worth, take a step back. You don't have to say yes to everything. You can say no to lots of things, and nobody's going to hate you. And if they do it, it's
then
okay.
Good. Bye.
Yeah.
Right. They're not worth your
time. And, making that, surrounding yourself, pulling things into you that align with what you are. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
I think I would tell myself 2 things, if that's allowed.
Yes.
Like Amada did. First, I would say slow down.
Yeah.
Because the pace of college is so different from anything that I ever experienced. And I think by speeding through it and kind of getting in the momentum of it, you lose opportunities to really individuate and say, hey, when do I want to choose my own path instead of doing what everyone else is doing? So that's one. And then I think the second one would be to not take everything so emotionally and big.
Yeah.
That college, high school, obviously high school dramas are big and, all that different stuff. College sort of levels that up because it feels like there's less of an ending. Like your graduation day feels a bit further in college. You feel like you're in real life, and some of the things that happen during college are going to feel really big. They're going to trigger new emotions that are bigger emotions that maybe you didn't know you had. So like I would say that there's understanding that that's a part of the process is having things feel even bigger, and just being able to contextualize and say, you know what, like I know this feels big in the moment. A month from now, I promise you it's not going to feel like a big deal at all. Right. So it's just about getting through that hump and saying like, you know what, like I'm going to let myself have this moment. I'm going to let myself feel whatever this feeling is. Yeah. I'm going to confide in whoever I need to confide in. And then I'm going to go search for the next good day. Yeah. And just keeping that mission going. Because that's really how you stay on campus for 4 years.
It is.
You just say, you know what, I'm going to get through this bad, rough patch. I'm going to get there. I'm going to ace that next test. I'm going to, reconnect with that friend group. I'm going to audition again for that group next year. Like whatever those things are that feel giant can be minimized once you look at the 4-year journey.
College is not Groundhog Day.
No.
And I don't know if anyone's seen that movie lately, but if you haven't seen it, go check it out. Bill Murray. But every day is different, and you can make every day super different, right?
I think for me it would be probably peer pressure, which could probably relate to boundaries at this point. And not just peer pressure of like, oh, I shouldn't have went to that party or I shouldn't have went to this like social outing. I'm talking like peer pressure of, hey, let's go to this concert instead of staying back and studying. Like it comes down to simple things as that. So like, just making sure that you're there for the right reason. Like your academics are important. It's important to have fun, but like you also are there to succeed and do well. So that would be mine, would be peer pressure / boundaries. Yeah,
absolutely. Love that. I think that's really important.
I'm going to add one last thing.
Yes, please.
So much of going to college in this time, it's interesting being in this generation and like seeing like just how like emboldened a lot of us are to really go and be our authentic selves. Like college can be a time where you really say like, you know what, like I haven't got to tell my story. I really want college to be the place where I'm gonna embrace it. I'm gonna be my big self. I'm gonna do that thing that I wasn't allowed to do at home, or say that thing that I wasn't allowed to say at home. That in many ways can be really liberating and great and awesome. But I think what comes with that is, that there's the potential of getting yourself in danger by not understanding that what you're doing is an experiment as opposed to a sort of a new lease on life, right? Like that just understanding that, hey, if you're going to experiment with new sides of yourself, or you're going to try this new thing, just making sure that you're doing within the bounds of like, hey, am I good? Am I doing this in a community that's going to take care of me? That will be there if this goes wrong. That there's so many 18-year-olds that show up to campus, try on this big new thing, and then a few months just that burnout of like, oh, like I can't keep up this new lifestyle. That's even another part of safety, which is just like, even if it's not one big thing that happens to you, it could just be like
cumulative, like that.
Right? Yeah. So it's just checking in, having people that are watching you and being like, hey, like, are you being open to somebody saying, hey, one of the most important questions, and it's such a Gen Z-ish thing, is like, you good? Like that question has so much weight.
It's so intense.
It's so intense. You good? And it's like usually the answer is like, yeah, I'm good. But like, if you really slow down, if someone's really asking, hey, like, you good? Like the question,
I'm not good.
Right? You might not
okay.
You might not be good, or someone might be seeing something that you're not seeing or feeling because like maybe your face is wearing it. So like pausing and saying like, yo, like, are you good? Actually saying like, all right, like, yo, am I good? Like that's a real thing to ask yourself that first semester, because you might not know what good feels like. Right. Yet. So like, figure out what good feels like, and then go from there.
Yeah, I love that. Well, we hope you're good. We're good.
You good?
You good? Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us on episode 3 of our podcast. Safety is a big deal, and I think it's really great to talk about it. Talk about it in the comments. Leave us any questions. We want to hear from you. And if you have any questions about things that are going on at your campus, or things that you just need a little bit more clarification on, reach out to us. We're always available. Go on the website. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you so much. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Our coaches at Give Something Back are here as a resource to help guide you through your college journey. To contact us with any questions you might have or to apply to a Give Something Back program, go to giveback.ngo and fill out the form at the bottom of our homepage. Additionally, you could DM us through Instagram or through Facebook, or you could email us at info@giveback.ngo. We look forward to hearing from you. We'll see you next time.